I'm back! This is how I turned my old GoPro Hero 6 into a dedicated astrophotography camera. But first, disclaimer time. In this video, there will be many products mentioned and used. None of the products used or talked about have sponsored or endorsed this video in any way. This video was entirely self-funded. If you follow my guidelines for this project and decide to do it for yourself, I am not responsible if you end up damaging your property. This project can destroy your GoPro if done incorrectly, and doing this project at all will void any warranties you may have on your GoPro. All the STL files created for this project are available for free in the description below, but they may only be used for non-commercial use and cannot be sold. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's get into it. In astrophotography, most dedicated cameras for telescopes involve lots of wires and a laptop, which is fine when you have a good power supply, but when it comes to remote areas without power, it becomes an even more expensive hobby. So I set out to create a cheap, simplified alternative. While weighing my options and going down a huge rabbit hole of cameras I could use for this project, I came across GoPro builds where people were trying to emulate DSLR cameras by replacing the face of the GoPro and exposing the sensor, which would allow them to put whatever lens they want on it, which is really cool, but... So I thought, exposed sensors? Exposed sensors. Wait! Astro Cams have exposed sensors. Now, I've always loved GoPros. I use them on my motorcycles, and while scuba diving, but I've never seen someone use one to photograph another planet. Is that even possible? Now, the problem that the DSLR GoPros have is the sensor is too far back in the body of the camera to effectively be in the focal point of the lenses used on it. What does that mean? It means the image is completely out of focus unless the sensor is moved entirely. You might be thinking, well, that complicates things, when really, it makes it even easier. Looking at the telescope we'll be using in this project, you'll see that the eyepiece has an adjustable focus, which moves the eyepiece closer or further away from the focal point. So instead of ripping the entire GoPro apart and moving the sensor closer to where it needs to be, all we have to do is adjust the focal point onto the sensor using that adjustable focus. So we just need to replace the face of the GoPro, remove the lens, and replace the IR filter so we have proper color. Easy, right? Here's some goals I have for this project. 1, it must look nice. I don't want this to look like some cobbled together doohickey hanging off my telescope. 2, it must be able to take planetary images. That's kind of the whole point. 3, it must be easy to work with. I want it to be as simple and fast to work with as possible. Now that we know what we're doing, it's finally time to dig in and start the... Welcome to my workbench. Before we start, please keep in mind that this project will only work on GoPro Heroes 5, 6, and 7 since they all share the same body style. The GoPro you see here is my Hero 6. You can see by the lens cover that it has seen a lot of action over the years. Since I've upgraded, it now gets no action, hence why I'm using it for the project. So I think it's time to give it a new life. First things first, we need to remove the battery. Next, remove the lens cover by pulling away and turning counterclockwise. Now pull out your closest hairdryer, in this case my girlfriend's hairdryer, or use a heat gun on low to heat up the plastic face. Try to get the plastic hot, but don't overdo it, you should still be able to touch it. This is to try and loosen up the adhesive to make the next step much easier. Now this next part is going to be kinda difficult. You'll need some type of pry tool or a flathead screwdriver to get the plastic face off. Start at the bottom right and work your way around the face of the camera. Using a plastic spacer or anything similar to it is extremely helpful during this part. Stay clear of the LCD screen and about ½ inch or 13 millimeters below it, because you don't want to accidentally nick or tear the ribbon cable going to it. Besides that, the entire front face is free to be poked at while trying to remove the plastic. Since we'll be throwing this piece of plastic away, you can be as rough as you want with it. Once you get about half of it off, it becomes much easier. Now that's over, it's time for the scariest part. Cutting the lens cover rails off the front metal frame. This has to be done to guarantee the sensor gets a full image out of the focal point and to allow room for the new IR filter. Now cut a small square out of a microfiber cloth to cover and protect the LCD screen. The LCD screen scratches really easily, so try to be as careful as you can. I'll be using a Dremel to save time, but this can also be done with a hacksaw that has a metal cutting blade. Now both of these tools generate a lot of heat through friction, and the frame of the GoPro is very good at conducting heat, so it is absolutely critical that you do not overheat the components of your GoPro. I cannot stress this enough. If it overheats, it could potentially desolder pieces on the circuit boards and completely ruin the camera. To prevent this, I'll be cutting it in bursts, and when I feel it's too warm, I'll stop and let it cool down. This takes a while, but it ensures the camera lives to see another day. Also, we are using the lens as a dust cover while we take this piece off. We definitely don't want any metal dust on or around the sensor. Try to make sure you don't cut too far into the lens or into the body of the camera. This worked very well, and as you can see, it doesn't have to be perfect. I even cut too far in and touched one of the lens O-rings, but nothing made it inside the camera, fortunately. Let's clean this up before we continue. The microfiber and the tape did really well protecting the LCD screen. Scrape off what's left of the rubbery adhesive. Also, use some alcohol and compressed air to clean off the rest of the camera, especially around the lens. Make sure there's absolutely no metal dust. Make sure the camera is totally clean and dry before continuing. This would be a good time to test and make sure everything still works. And it still works perfectly. Alright, now pull out the battery and we'll carry on. The teardown is complete besides the lens for now. It's time to... This next chapter in the video will be pretty quick. Starting off strong, it's caliper time for some measurements. Let's draw this up real quick. We're switching from tutorial mode into story mode, so sit back, relax, and watch the magic happen. Now let's hop onto the Steam Deck and draw up some STL files. For this build, and since it's a smaller project, Tinkercad works perfectly, and it's free, so I highly recommend it to all of you who are getting into 3D printing.
Tinkercad speedrun, 100% file completion, starting now.
Done! Haters will say it's sped up. Time to transfer it over to the printer. I print on a modded Creality Ender 3 with a glass bed. It still amazes me every time what I can pull off with this 3D printer. Just a reminder, the final draft of these STL files are available for free in the description below. Here's the rough draft, which I'm using to dry fit and correct my design. Basically, it's two pieces. A new face with a slot to hold the IR filter, and a second piece which sits on top of that IR filter and has a threaded Cmount attachment. After tons of changes, here are all the prints. Between them, you'll see how the quality and thickness improved. I really like glass beds paired with my temperature settings because they give that glossy, almost carbon fiber look to my prints. I have to add, a glass bed isn't necessary for this project, but it definitely makes it look better in my opinion. Alright, back to... We're back on the workbench for assembly. First thing you'll need is... followed by a paintbrush, the IR filter, and a 5mm Cmount spacer. Let's prep the JB Weld. The spacer will give a metal surface for the eyepiece screws to bite into. You can find them on Amazon. Fill the provided tray with a 2-part JB Weld. Make sure not to use too much because we'll be using the same tube of JB Weld later. Stir the parts together until it's a single consistent color. Now we'll use the paintbrush to paint the JB Weld onto the threads. This will act as a super thread lock for the spacer. Now thread the spacer in, it should be a perfect fit. We will now apply the weld to the IR slot. Really glob it on there. This IR filter is 26mm and has a wavelength of 650 nanometers. It was also purchased on Amazon. Links in the description for all ordered parts. Be super careful when handling the filter. Just hold the edges and drop it right into the slot. Oils from the skin won't come off the filter. When it's in, apply some pressure on the edges to set it in place. Now, paint the edges of the filter. You can do this project without a filter if you want a full spectrum camera, but that isn't what I'm going for. And also, the filter will seal the sensor from the environment. Take the other piece and paint the weld on the bottom of it. You will want good coverage on the entire piece. This part is a little sketchy. Slowly lower the piece onto the face, lining up the holes as precisely as you can. You have only one shot at getting this right. Finally, that's all over. Let that all cure overnight. In the meantime, let's go back to the camera. Now we're going to use a Sharpie to color in the cut metal. I don't think any of the metal will be exposed, but I'm doing this just to be sure we won't have light reflecting around. It's the next day, and we're on the final steps of the build. All we need to do now is remove the lens and weld the new face on. Removing the lens is pretty easy. Use some needle nose pliers and turn the lens counterclockwise. I'm facing the camera down just in case there's somehow any metal dust left over. It was totally clean. Get that JB Weld back out. Definitely use more than last time. Mix it up and start applying it. Once again, you'll be slowly and precisely lowering the new face in place. This is a little more forgiving if it's not perfect. You can make slow and slight adjustments. When it's in place, give it some pressure on all 4 corners and leave it alone for another 24 hours. Also, when you let the pieces cure, make sure you cover the filter with something to prevent dust from getting on it. I just used the case the IR filter came in. It looks amazing, but it's not quite finished. On the new face, I gave it a large tolerance because I know not everyone who attempts this will cut the rails the same, so we now need to fill the gap. Get a syringe from the hardware store and directly fill it with the 2 parts. This is the final use of our JB Weld, which has served us so well. Stir it up and begin applying it. Do not inject it into the camera, just try to copy my filling pattern. We are only trying to fill the gap. Now guess what we're gonna do? That's right! Let it sit for another 24 hours! Yay! The camera is finally finished, and I have to say, it's looking really good. Definitely hitting that goal I had set for it. But it's missing one last thing, the C-mount tube and dust cover. But this is easy, it just threads right in. Wow. Just wow. I believe it's time to we can finally leave the workbench and see if this thing actually works. The telescope we are using is an HSL Reflector Telescope that has a 700mm focal length. Once again, link in the description. It's the moment we've all been waiting for. Does it work? Now, I'm not going to try focusing this thing off the stock screen. Instead, I'll be using the GoPro Quick app on my phone and directly cast to it from the camera. I am very pleased with the setup. It definitely achieves that goal I had for efficiency. So now we know it works. But where are we going to go to really test its abilities and see if it could capture planetary images? Because locally on the Central Coast, during our summer, our mornings and nights are filled with... To start checking weather, I like to use a site called zoom.earth, which shows live satellite images taken every 10 minutes from geostationary satellites. It's super helpful with seeing where clear skies are and predicting weather patterns. And as you can see, that fog comes in at night and burns off by noon, which tells us we're going to have to go on a little trip inland to capture anything at night. Next, we'll have to check a light pollution map to find a dark sky to image. For this, I just use lightpollutionmap.info. Using these maps together, we can pinpoint a general location that will provide us with the best chance for planetary imagery. And that place will be Mount Pinos in the Los Padres National Forest. This place is a legendary location for Central and SoCal astrophotography. It has a lot of history with space enthusiasts, and I've always wanted to bring a setup like this there, especially since the camping is free and the mountain alone is very beautiful. So let's pack it up and head out to catch this moment of good weather. I made this little case to keep everything safe and clean while we travel. And also, I'm bringing the Hero 11 for some night lapse action. Time to hit the road.
Initiate drive montage.
We're making this stop so I can visit family and dial in everything before we head up the mountain. I'm mostly focused on aligning the finder scope, but I'm also adjusting the camera settings. It's just that without a tuned finder scope, we will be lost in the sky. Speaking of camera settings, here's what we're working with. I have the camera set to 4K 60 with the field of view set to wide so there is no cropping. The Pro Tune settings are all set to auto right now, but in the dark I'll be changing the max ISO down to 800. Possibly even lower like 400, and an EV comp to be either +2 or -2, but this is all depending on the shot conditions. The GoPro Quick app is really easy to tinker with on the spot, so I'm not too worried about it. Before we hit the road again, here's a little fun fact. The GoPro still records sound, and it ended up catching this amazing dialogue between my dad and I. This is one of my older GoPros, and I rebuilt it specifically for this.
What's all that black shit?
That is JB Weld. Alright, it's all tuned up and ready to go. So let's pack it up and hit the road again. Well, we made it, and we're not alone. Looks like we got some other enthusiasts here. Let's set up camp and get everything ready for bed. We will be getting up at 2 a.m. to catch the planets tonight. Oh, first try! Here's the sleeping situation in the silica. Got the telescope right there. Got my bed laid out. Hopefully I can fall asleep. It might be a rough night. I am starving, so I'm gonna get some food going right now. Waiting for that to boil now, but we have the essentials. Let's go. It be a boiling, laddies. Moments like this are always my favorite. Peace like this can be hard to come by. And then it gets interrupted by something like this. Fantastic. I love when this happens. Oh yeah. Oh, they're swimming. Come on, guys. Damn. Speaking of bugs, the summer up here is filled with them. I have no idea how I'm gonna go to bed at 8. So I'm gonna try and get some energy out right now. Just explore around, maybe climb some cool rocks. I do not have the shoes on for this right now, but I don't really care. So we're gonna just go for it. I can confirm that was a nice rock. That was a really nice rock. You can see quite a setup down there. Pretty cool group of guys. All right, it's time to head to bed, or at least close my eyes until 2 a.m. Time to lock myself in the trunk of my car. Woo! I'm in. It is officially bedtime. As you can see, still a little bright. It's a little too early for me, but we gotta do it. We gotta commit. We're getting up at 2 in the morning, so see you fellas later. Right now we have it set on Mars. Hand tracking this stuff is unbelievably difficult. Just been sitting here. I think it's a little too far. Readjust it back down. This was a super awesome night. I cannot wait to head home and process all the imagery. But first, it's tradition for me when I come up here that I hike to the top of Mount Pinos. All right, the road out of here is right down over here. Want to see something cool? Now that we are back home, I have one last thing I want to capture that wasn't visible the night that we were on the mountain. It's been about a week since we were on Mount Pinos, and we have a rare treat here, a clear night. Let's see what we can capture tonight. Wow! This camera can image the lunar surface perfectly. I can't get over seeing the mountain ranges and craters in detail. It's incredible and just wild that I'm capturing all of this on a GoPro. This is just crazy. Look at that. Wow. Well, I caught it just at the perfect time, because look what is back. It's time to process what we captured. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do this, but I will link a video in the description that provides the software and a good tutorial on how to do it. Basically, what I'm doing is a process called stacking, or photo stacking. And no, it's not fake or AI. It's a process in which you take a lot of images of one object, and then you stack them on top of each other. Any information that's missing in one photo will be filled in by another photo that was stacked on top of it. Pretty simple, right? I think it's time I finally show the results of that. We did it! Woo! I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I had a great time making it, and I can't wait to show you guys my next project. So in the meantime, I hope you guys consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.